Hello and welcome back to the Import Export Hub channel, everybody. Borin Bogdan here, your not so entertaining host for the next couple of minutes. Thanks for joining in, and guys, skipping the part where I'm practically begging you for some clicks. Let's dive into today's topic, a topic requested by one of the viewers, in which basically I will cover the major imports and exports of South Africa for 2022. I will show you the main trading partners for each flow, spiced where possible, guys, with a couple of examples in order to see the real import or export drivers. So South Africa is the S from BRICS. It's a country with almost 60 million inhabitants. It's the world's largest producer of gold and platinum. It has a very large base for automobile assembly. According to World Bank Logistics Performance Index, it ranks 19th overall, well above North African and sub-Saharan countries, with good figures in terms of logistics competence and tracking and tracing, but unfortunately lacking some points on the customs score, where South Africa scored the least. So, guys, these were a couple of fast facts about South Africa. And now let's dive into the boring numbers here. And as usual, I will start with South Africa's overall exports, who in 2022 amounted to some $123.6 billion, with chapters 71, 27, and 26 as the main drivers, which were followed by chapters 87, 72, so iron and steel, or 28 here, the last one, with some $1.9 billion worth of exports. Relative to the year-on-year dynamics, the exports fell with an insignificant 0.1%, and we see that only two chapters in this top 10 list had contractions. So chapter 71 and 26 with 23 and 12% respectively, while the others had positive changes. The largest one, both in absolute and relative terms, happening in relation with chapter 27, so mineral fuels and oils, with almost $7 billion more exports. In terms of export concentration for the top 10 chapters, so almost half of South Africa's overall exports are done by only 3 chapters with little or no added value. It is a commodity-rich curse, if you want, heavily dependent on the world of commodity market with its opacity. And personally, until I will see how the below-the-ground riches are somehow transformed in above-the-ground South African wealth, pivoting somehow towards more value-adding activities, this is not a sustainable strategy on the long run, especially with all the socio-economic and cultural heritage of South Africa. Anyways, I'm not here to talk about policies, so I will move to South Africa's overall imports, which in 2022 amounted to some $112 billion, with chapter 27, 84, and 85 driving most of them, followed by others like, I don't know, 87, 39, or 28. So inorganic chemicals, the last one with $2 billion worth of imports. The year-on-year imports overall were up with 19.5%, with almost all the top 10 chapters experiencing growth, except for chapter 99 and chapter 30, who shrunk with 1.2 and 13.3% respectively. But let's face it, all in all, the figures are positive. As we can see here, more than 1/5 of South Africa's imports are driven by the mineral and the fuel chapter, so 27, And if you add also chapter 99 here, I think you have some 30% of the overall imports focused only on commodities. Now, in what concerns the balance of trade for South Africa for 2022, we see $11.7 billion positive trade balance, with only one chapter in this top 10 list having a positive figure, so chapter 87, meaning that South Africa managed to export more than it managed to import, which is a good thing given the fact that there are some value-added activities taking place. And with the overall imports and exports being covered, guys, I will now focus my attention on the top 5 chapters from each flow to see also the trading partners. And I will start with the biggest export driver, which was chapter 71. And we see that we have some $26.7 billion worth of exports, with Japan here, areas not elsewhere specified, and the United States as the main partners, followed by others like, I don't know, the United Kingdom, Hong Kong, or China, to name just a couple. The year-on-year change was negative, some $8 billion fewer exports relative to the previous year, with only 2 countries from this top 10 list having imported more. So we're talking about the United Arab Emirates and Botswana, while the rest of 8 had negative changes. The largest, at least in absolute terms, happening in relation with the United States, some $2.24 billion. As for the main drivers from this chapter, we have platinum, including here palladium, rhodium, and other EUM suffixes metals, so heading 7110, while towards the United Arab Emirates and Belgium, with Antwerp as the capital of diamond trading, we have what else diamond, guys. So we're talking about heading 7102. And here it's going to be very, very interesting to see how things will develop in the medium term, as my guess is that Dubai will take over Antwerp's supremacy as the diamond trading capital of the world. But this is just me. There is a lot of smuggling activities happening there. But anyways, I'm not here to point fingers, so I will move to my South Africa's second largest export driver for 2022, which was chapter 27, with some $17 billion worth of exports, 65% more relative to 2021. With India, the Netherlands here, and South Korea as the main trading partners, which were followed by others like, I don't know, Mozambique, Italy, or Pakistan, to name just a few. Overall, the year-on-year changes, as I've said, were positive, except Pakistan, who cut in half its imports from South Africa. But we have strong figures coming from the Netherlands with almost $1.5 billion. And also South Korea with $940 million more exports towards them. So very, very good times for the bulk shipping and trading companies in 2022. While in terms of main drivers, we have for both India and Italy the same heading, 2701. So we're talking about coal. Jumping now, guys, to the third largest export driver, we have here another commodity. This time we're talking about ores, slag, and ash, with almost $16.3 billion worth of exports. Unfortunately, 12% less relative to 2021, and almost $2.2 billion if I were to put a dollar figure to the percentage, with China here, Germany, and Mozambique as the main partners, which were followed in this top 10 list by others like the United Kingdom, the US, or Turkey. These last 3 being the only ones having registered an expansion in 2022, but let's face it, not enough to put the overall exports from this chapter on the green. As for the main drivers, again, we see two examples with the same headings. So 2601 for both China and Turkey. Moving now to South Africa's fourth largest export driver. We have here heading 87, and we're entering the chapters where there is a lot more added value compared to the previous chapters. So as I was saying, we have here vehicles basically with some $11.2 billion worth of exports, with Germany, Belgium, and the United States as the main partners, followed by others like the United Kingdom, Japan, or Australia. And overall, the year-on-year changes were positive, 4.6% in relative terms and $495 million in absolute ones, with only two countries in this top 10 list experiencing a decline in imports from South Africa. So we're talking about the United Kingdom and Australia. But we have on the other side big expansions coming from Belgium and also Japan, with $538 million more imports for the former and $230 million more imports for the latter. As for the main drivers, in case we're wondering, guys, well, towards Belgium we have heading 5704. Motor vehicles for the transport of goods, including here chassis with engines and cab. While towards Japan, we have heading 8703, so motor cars principally designed for the transport of persons. And finally, the fifth and the last chapter that I will cover from the export flow is 84. Again, a chapter with a lot more value-adding activity done locally, and we see that for 2022, South Africa's exports from this chapter amounted to some $6.65 billion, just 0.38% more relative to 2021. With Germany, the United States, and Zimbabwe as the main partners, followed by others like Zambia, Congo, or the United Kingdom, again, to name just a few from this top 10 list. Relative to the year-on-year changes, we see that there are four countries in the red, unfortunately. Germany being one of them, who happens to be also South Africa's largest partner. And we see here that the imports shrunk with some $209 million, which is the largest amount, even though we see a nice performance towards Congo with some $102 million more imports from South Africa. Now, in what concerns the main drivers, guys, we see that centrifuges were the main driver towards the United States, while towards Congo we have heading 8429, so self-propelled bulldozers, graders, and other road and construction machinery, most probably, if you ask me, needed for infrastructure development and mining activities. Jumping now to the largest driver for South Africa's imports, we have here chapter 27 with almost $25.5 billion worth of imports in 2022, 65% more relative to 2021, and some $10 billion in absolute terms, with the United Arab Emirates, India, and Saudi Arabia as the main partners, which were followed by other big energy exporters like Oman, Nigeria, or Bahrain, to name just a couple from this top 10 list. As we can see here, all the top 10 partners had positive changes, some with big year-on-year volatility like the United Arab Emirates, India, or Singapore, while others had more contained dynamics like Saudi Arabia or Nigeria. The last one with only 0.79% positive change. And guys, speaking of Nigeria, I will tell you also that crude petroleum drove most of the imports from this country, while from Oman we have here heading 2710, so petroleum oils excluding crude petroleum. Moving now to the second largest import driver for South Africa in 2022. We have here a high-ranking chapter 84 with some $12.5 billion worth of imports for 2022. $1.2 billion more than in the previous year, with China, the United States, and Germany as the main trading partners, which were followed by others like, I don't know, Japan, Poland, or France. Poland managing to export some $231 million worth of goods from this chapter. Now, relative to the year-on-year changes, except France here, who managed to export less in 2022, the rest of the 9 partners managed more or less strong results. The largest absolute positive change happening in relation with the United States, some $320 million more exports, mainly driven by heading 8431, 8431, while Poland's exports towards South Africa were mainly driven by heading 8471. So we're talking here about automatic data processing machines and units thereof, magnetic or optical readers, etc., etc. Jumping now to South Africa's third largest import driver, we have here another high-ranking chapter. This time we're having chapter 85 with electrical machinery, electrical equipment, and parts thereof. We see that in 2022 the imports jumped with 21% relative to 2021, some $1.8 billion in absolute terms, bringing the overall imports from this chapter to roughly $10.5 billion, with China here, Vietnam, and India as the main partners, which were followed by others like, I don't know, the United States, Taiwan, or Malaysia, again to mention just a couple from this top 10 list. In what concerns the year-on-year changes, we see that only Vietnam suffered, if you want, almost 10% contraction, while the rest of the trading partners from this top 10 list managed good results, all above the $10 million mark. But clearly, guys, China dwarfed all the rest of them with some $1.4 billion more exports. And speaking previously about Vietnam, we see that telephone sets, basically mobile phones, drove most of the imports from this country, while from Italy we have here heading 8544, so insulated wire cable, including here coaxial cable. So that was very, very briefly the coverage of this chapter, and now I will move to the fourth largest one, chapter 87. It seems that these last 3 chapters came almost consecutively. So we're talking about vehicles with almost $8.5 billion worth of imports in 2022, which is 32% more in relative terms and some $2 billion in absolute ones, with India, China, and Germany as the main partners, followed by others like Japan, Thailand, or Slovakia. As we can see here, all the top 10 trading partners from this chapter had positive changes. The largest absolute one happening in relation with India, some $462 million, almost $500 million, which is really, really impressive if you ask me. And in what concerns the main drivers, I've put 2 examples here, Germany and Thailand. And we have heading 8703 for the former and heading 8708 for the latter. So parts and accessories for tractors, motor vehicles, and the likes. And finally, guys, South Africa's fifth and last chapter that I will cover, bear with me, it's coming from chapter 99. So commodities not elsewhere specified, a very, very tricky chapter because unfortunately I didn't have access to more granular data in order to see what really drove South Africa's imports. But anyways, let's see the values here, and basically except for 2020, where we have a drop of more or less 2.4 billion dollars compared with 2019. For the rest of the years, we see that the imports hovered around the 7.5 billion dollars. 2022 saw contraction of 1.2% in relative terms and some $91 million in absolute terms, with Germany here, Thailand and Japan as the main partners, followed by others like, I don't know, the United States, China or Austria. As we can see here in this top 10 list, at least, we have a 50-50 split between positive and negative changes, and I will cover the largest absolute ones. So in terms of negative changes, we have $162 million fewer imports from Japan, while in terms of positive changes from Germany, we have almost $248 million more imports, almost 11% more relative to 2021. As I've said previously, I didn't have access to more granular or detailed data. These are special purpose codes and could involve goods delivered to vessels and aircrafts, or goods delivered for the crew of offshore installation, or even personal property belonging to, I don't know, somebody who transfers its place of residence to South Africa. So unfortunately, I can't really pinpoint the exact driver, and guys, you will have to solve these puzzles. And with this being said, that's all for today. Thanks for watching. I really hope you've enjoyed. Don't forget to hit whatever button you like. And as usual, until next time, keep your business safe. Thanks.